I now see and hear it, receive and uphold it, and I vow to fathom the Tathagata's true meaning. The Tathagatas here means Ru Lai, a new lie. That's what it means. Okay. We are in the native directions of the Amida Sutra. We've been talking about, we talked about the Lion Buddha, the renowned Buddha. The name Light Buddha is what we left off. And next is the Dhamma, Bodhidharma Buddha. But then I skipped and then I went and prepared for the Dhamma Banner Buddha. So that's what we're going to talk about today is the Dhamma Banner Buddha. So, so where we left off, we had a little bit left remaining for the name Light Buddha, representing upholding the Dhamma name recitation method. And in order to be successful in the Buddha mindfulness method, we should have reverence, respect for all Buddhas. And that's what we left off last time was reverence for Buddhas. We have discussed about how in order to have this reverence, we need to it helps us to cultivate merits. Having reverence is the foundation for merit cultivation. Right, we went through that, and merit is the foundation, and that helps us to have meditation. And with meditation, it helps us to uncover our wisdom. And so it's called a threefold study. 三vô lậu học, 三学, giới định tuệ, right? 戒定慧. So it's threefold study: precepts, meditation, and wisdom. And there are differences in observing the precepts, 止giới or 持戒. That is internal reflections, right? That helps us to distinguish between what's right and what's wrong. Because when you have precepts, you have morality, you understand what is right and what is wrong, and you avoid what is wrong, what is unskillful, and choose what is skillful. So for shan or ting, it's often used as skillfulness as opposed to bad or evilness. Because with skillfulness, there is a suggestion that there is some sort of determination, ability to distinguish. For example, a person who may be very smart, but can do unskillful things. Like you're smart, but then you go and yell people, you become jealous, so that's unskillful. It doesn't mean you're evil, it's just that you are unskillful. You've lost your ability to decide what's wrong, what's right, so that's unskillful. So when we talk about ting and shan, we often use the word unskillful as opposed to evilness or something that's bad, right? And likewise for something that's like unskillful is or act, we don't use evilness, but we use unskillfulness as opposed to skillfulness. The meaning is clearer when we say somebody is skillful or somebody's unskillful, and it's less offensive too. When you say somebody's evil, then people can take that as an offense. But when you say they are unskillful, oh, they didn't think it right, because in the moment of hasty behavior, you didn't think clearly. So that without that clarity in the mind, that's unskillfulness. Does it make sense? Right? So that's what when we say observing precepts, that one can be unskillful or skillful, and so at this level we distinguish between what is skillful and what is unskillful. Then after you're completely, or most of the time you are skillful, you're used to that skillfulness, meaning you like to do good deeds. Good deeds is part of your nature. You like to do good deeds. You like to help people. That's skillfulness. And so that means you have a good grasp of precepts. Right? You understand what precept you're motivated, and you like to help people. And that is precept morality. You are a moral person. you are an ethical person. So that's the foundation. The next level up is meditation. Meditation here is the reflection between, it's no longer skillful versus unskillful, but it's now disturbance as opposed to undisturbance. Between động và bất động, tung and不动. It's no longer about good or bad, right? It's no longer about skillful or unskillful, but it's now about, can you detect your mind being disturbed or not? Tung versus 不动, động và bất động. Can you understand, right? That's the next level up, because when you are at the first level observing precept, your mind can still be disturbed because you may be very, very joyful without control. You may be very upset without control. Somebody says something bad to you, you get upset, or somebody compliments you, you feel joyful. Your mind is still disturbed. So that's the first level, but the next level up to meditation, we're no longer talking about skillfulness or unskillfulness, because it's all skillfulness. Because at that point, in order for your mind to be very meditative, you feel very at ease, you feel very positive. Now it's the practice of controlling the mind to be undisturbed, or to avoid disturbance. But at this level, it's still not enough, because your mind is so determined, so strong, that you can suppress what you don't want to feel. You can still suppress it. You have not gotten rid of the problem. You have just suppressed the problem. So that's the second level. You can control it. You contain it. You put it in a box, just like a wild pet, a dog. You have not gotten rid of the dog yet, but just put it in a cage. You contain the problem. The problem is still there. So that's where it requires wisdom. Wisdom. So wisdom is no longer disturbance or non-disturbance. 动或不动, or động bất động. We're no longer talking about the mind disturbance or not. But now we're talking about delusion and awakening. When we observe precept, when we're a moral person, there can still be disturbance, mental disturbance, right? You feel joyful or you feel sad. Even if you've done all the good things, there can still be delusion. For example, you go out and you help people, but because of fame, because of power, influence, that you help people, that is delusional. In awakening, so in meditation, there can still be illusion too, because you're suppressing the problems. You're in meditative joy, but there's still delusion. It's about you feeling this meditative joy. That's still egoistic drive. Cái bản ngã, 自我. The ego is still controlling us when we are still in the meditative stage. But when we get to wisdom, that's when we shine lights to the ego, and that's where it disappears. All the delusion disappears. Now you have only awakening, enlightenment. Does it make sense? So the three levels, right? The first level is precepts. 持戒, 戒giới, is to mold ourselves to be more and more naturally moral or ethical. And then now our mind is meditative. When we see good things happening to us, we don't go crazy. When we see negative things, we don't become agitated. Because we have the ability to suppress what we don't want to feel. Right? When you have that meditation, you have the ability to suppress your joy or your negative feelings. But it's likely you're going to suppress only your negative feelings, but you allow your positive joy, the feelings, the joy to come to fruition, because you like to enjoy that meditative bliss. It's still delusional because it's under the influence of the ego, bản ngã, 自我. Only when we get to wisdom, 智慧, trí tuệ, then can we see the delusion and attain enlightenment. That's where we have the ability truly ability to destroy unhealthy craving and afflictions at the root. Right? With meditation alone, you are still suppressing it. The roots are still there. The roots of affliction, craving are still there. Until you have see the delusions and shine light into it, on it, you cannot get rid of it. For example, like a person who says, let's say smoking. You say, okay, well, it's not good manner to smoke in class or smoke, around people because of the law. So you can suppress. You say, okay, I'm going to quit. I'm going to not smoke. So temporarily, at that moment, you are observing the precept. You're following the law. So you don't smoke at that time. And then if you're even if nobody is telling me to not smoke, I'm gonna cast rise to strength so that I'm gonna force myself to not smoke. So you can suppress yourself momentarily. But then you are still under the influence of the desire to smoke. But when you cast rise to wisdom is like when you see that it will cause you health issues. When you smoke, you make people, you cause unhealthy influence on your family. Secondhand smoking, which is not good, and you are hurting yourself, you are hurting your family, and therefore you stop smoking because you realize the unhealthy desire. And that's where some people stop smoking. They quit smoking because they realize how bad it is and that it brings them no permanent joy, long-term joy. And when they see the negative impacts, the long-term negative impacts, they become awakened and they stop smoking. And not because somebody's telling them not to smoke, but they come to self-realization that they should stop smoking and they quit cold turkey. So that's an example, right? So the delusion is what causes suffering, because not knowing the cause of dissatisfactions and the way to end suffering. We encounter negative situations, but we don't know why we're in those negative situations. And meditation here suppresses the suffering, right? When we have meditation, we can suppress our mind, we can not pay attention, we can cut out our senses to not interact with the world, to temporarily suppress the suffering. But it really takes wisdom, prajna, border, or bhajna, jitue, in order to resolve sufferings and dissatisfaction at the root. And so here's an example of meditation and prajna, the difference. Why meditation alone is not sufficient. So in his book, Bodhisattva Ideal, Bồ-Tát, Đạo Bồ-Tát, or Phú Sa Tao, he said that when we're in meditation, jhana, the self is forgotten. But that persistent illusion is not lost, it's still there. We are suppressing the mind only, and the delusion is still there. The illusion is still there. We have not come to realization. And that is the great difference between jhana, thiền định, or chanting, and prajna, bhajna, border, or trí tuệ. So that's the difference between two types of meditation. One is samatha, and the other one is vipassana. Samatha is zi, and vipassana is quan. Một bên là chỉ, một bên là quán, chỉ quán, thiền định. Samatha is calming meditation. Vipassana is wisdom meditation. So he said that in the jhana experience, especially higher jhana experience, there can be an abeyance of thought and activity. When you stop all thinking, you stop all your senses, so you don't feel anymore. You don't feel the suffering anymore. Like you numb. Essentially, you are numbing your senses. And when you come out of it, of that experience, that jhanic experience, that thiền định or chanting, you come back to the self, 自我bản ngã. You come back to the ego, and the ego is there waiting for you, ready to take over. So when we when we are in meditation, we can suppress our arrogance, our hatred, because we're all positive. But when we get out of it, we still feel angry again. We can still feel angry again. We allow the negative activities to come to fruition, to arise. And that is because the ego is controlling us now. It's now taking control of us. When we're in meditation, we can control it, we can contain it. But when we're out meditation, it's like a jack in the box, right? It pops out and it starts to take over us. It's ready to take over. And so meditation alone is not enough. That's why it requires wisdom. So the only way we can get rid of the ego is through insight and wisdom. So that's the main difference between jhana, meditation, and wisdom, prana. Only prana brings permanent freedom and peace. In meditation, you can temporarily suppress all your feelings because you're focusing on your meditative joy. And essentially you stop all your senses, right? You close your eyes so you don't interact with the world. And you just sit there, you don't interact much, so you are temporarily suppressing your consciousness, essentially. But when you get out of it, that's when you start to interact with the world and you get disturbed again. So the only understanding, and not just a conceptual understanding, meaning that you just don't learn, but you have to put into practice of the sunyata, kongtang, xing kong, emptiness. And you can have many delightful experiences of abeyance of the ego, but from those experiences you come back to the ego. So after meditation, you come back to the ego. After our meditation practice, you go back to the world. You have to interact with the people you like or may not like. You have to do things that you may like or may not like. So those things could interfere with your the bliss that you had. Right? So, but it's only prana finally undermines the ego. Only prana can disperse the ego. No more, the shine lights onto it, and it's no longer there. And that's getting rid of illusion. So you have a clear understanding of the three levels, right? Precepts, meditation, and wisdom. And why we need to get to wisdom, why meditation alone is not enough. Is it clear? Okay. So having wisdom, it doesn't mean that things will be smooth. When we practice Buddhism, don't expect that things will always be blissful. Having wisdom, and when we study meditation, it doesn't mean that things will be smooth. And we shouldn't expect things to be smooth when after we study meditation. But there is something to be gained from studying Buddhism. And that is, there is pain but no suffering. With delusion, there is pain and suffering. Right, so we talked about that last time. So let's just click here. For example, here's an example from the Dhammapada, the story about the Buddha. When the Buddha became very popular, and Devadatta, he became jealous of the Buddha, and he joined forces with Ajatasattu, which is the prince. And he wanted to kill the Buddha by pushing a boulder, a big rock, down the hill to crush the Buddha. But while it was down the hill, it got caught by something along that, and it split into many pieces, and one of those pieces struck the Buddha's foot and caused the foot to bleed. And the Buddha suffered intense pain. So there was a personal physician, Javaka, of the Buddha. He heard of the news, and so he went to attend the Buddha, and he wound by the wound. He tried to cure the wound, and he wrapped like cloth to stop the bleeding. And then he said to the Buddha, "Venerable, I have a patient in the city that I need to go see, but I will return and to make sure of the wound that is healing. So remain as is until I return," right? But then when Javaka returned, it was too late and the gate was closed, so he couldn't get to the Buddha in time. So he thought to himself, if I didn't remove this wrap, and the Buddha had to endure this wrap the whole night, it will cause him intense pain because it's interfered with the blood circulation. And so when he caused rise to that thought, the Buddha understood his thought because the Buddha had supernatural power. And he told Ananda that he had in that Javaka has in his thought that if he didn't remove this band-aid, that the Buddha would be in intense pain. He asked Ananda to remove the bandage for him. And so when he arrived, he felt so sorry that he couldn't come back early enough. But then the Buddha told him that everything was okay. And in this verse here, the Buddha says that they are at journey's end, referring to the enlightened ones, like the Buddhas. Their quest for liberation has succeeded. They are sorrowless and are totally released in mind. They have got rid of all knots and no bonds bound them. In them, no anxiety exists. So even though there is pain, but there is no suffering, right? The Buddha, when he was bleeding, it caused him intense pain, but there was no suffering. But with delusion, there is pain and suffering, right? When somebody hurts us, slap us in the face, we get upset, we feel hurt, but then there is suffering because we feel embarrassed, we feel violated, and we want vengeance. And so that's causing additional suffering. So how do we overcome difficulties when we encounter such incidents where difficulties arise and suffering, pain arises? How do we overcome those situations? So there are two ways that we can overcome our pain and suffering. One is the egoistic way. The second is based on merit. And the egoistic way is when we have pain, we grind our teeth, right? We use our physical, mental energy to suppress the pain, right? We try to overcome the egoistic way. And by suppressing our undesired emotions, that's one way of controlling that pain, right? It temporarily gives us some calm because we can control it. We grind our teeth like we're not taking action, we're not punching anybody's in the face, but we're controlling ourselves by suppressing our feelings. And that can cause rise to anger, internal anger that people may not see, but inside we are very angry. And it will push us to do unskillful deeds. Right? We don't think clearly, and therefore we can commit unskillful karma, bad karma. And that may cause depressions or may cause us wants to take vengeance on other people. So that's one way of controlling our pain. And the other way is to gain the strength and by using our merits. When we cultivate merits, when we have morality, with merits, we recognize the unskillful and the skillful states of mind. And when we practice meditation on top of that, we generate this disturbed mind, right? When somebody violates us, we stay calm. We recognize that if we were to become angry, then that would be unskillful. And therefore, that gives, because of that merit, that allows us to recognize we're about to commit unskillful deeds. And when we practice meditation, it allows us to maintain calm. We're essentially suppressing our negative emotions. And with wisdom, we can sustain that calm. So with meditation alone, it's just temporary. But with wisdom, is that we can see reality of dissatisfaction, impermanence, and no self. Dissatisfaction is ku or ko. Impermanent is wu tang, vô thường. And no self is wu wo, or vô ngã. But when the translation is suffering, dukkha, but it's not suffering, it's really dissatisfaction. By recognizing dissatisfaction, things that are dissatisfaction, we are essentially, it doesn't mean that we are psychologically disgust of the world. When we see things being dissatisfied, it doesn't mean that we hate the world, we hate things. And that we don't run into the woods, into the forest to hide from problems. Right? When we understand that things are dissatisfaction, we don't run and hide, but we are motivated for something else. Spiritually speaking, we have this aspiration for something better. That's why you're dissatisfied. For example, you have $10. Compared to a person without any money, that's very good. But you don't just settle there, you want more, meaning that you can be better. And the only way that you think you can be better is you are unsatisfied with what you have. When you have a grade B, you just don't, you say, oh, C plus, right? Yes, I'm passing. No, that's not good enough. And the only way that you are willing to drive for something better, like a B and then an A, is that you are unsatisfied with the grade that you have, right? That's the only way. If you are happy with what you have, then there's no motivation to continue. So that's why the dissatisfaction here is not a psychological disgust to hate the world, but because you have seen something better and that you are motivated to achieve that, something better. So the next thing is impermanence. Impermanence, vô thường, wu tang, it's not a pessimistic view of the world and everything coming to an end. That's not what impermanence is. But impermanence allows us the transitions from the cyclic oscillation between suffering and joy. In this world, we see that suffering and joy, they cycle and they take place of each other. After you have joy, then you face dissatisfaction, suffering. And after suffering, you have joy. Like the example that we gave last time. But when you recognize that you are motivated for spiritual growth, from happiness to joy to rapture to bliss. So that's what impermanence is. It allows us to grow forever. Because without impermanence, there is no growth. Without impermanence, you can never be better. That's why impermanence is important to recognize that. Impermanence it gives us the ability to change for better or worse. It depends on how you take it. Then the third is to see no self, to understand no self, to recognize this. And again, this is not a conceptual understanding, meaning study the words, but you have to put it into practice. And then no self is, when we study no self, it's not an excuse to be irresponsible for one's actions. But no self here is that there is no fixed, unchanging self. There is nothing fixed, right? It can change. And so when we study no self, we understand that there is the real part and there is the imaginary part. The real is in terms of karmic results. When we do something, there will be a karmic consequence. But we understand that karmic consequence is not permanent. Let's say you've done something unskillful, there will be suffering to follow. But that suffering is not permanent. You don't suffer forever for the rest of your life and life after life. But you can change that suffering into joy, because that suffering is no self, has no substance. Vô ngã is not permanent. Does it make sense? So that self is not It's not something that exists and unchanging. That's why there's no self in it. It can change. When it changes, then that self, that substance has changed as well. So when we recognize dissatisfaction, impermanence, and no self, we are seeing reality. And we don't become attached and start to restrict ourselves, but we can see the potential growth, the hidden potentials in us, infinite possibilities that we can achieve. So these things here, dissatisfaction, impermanence, and no self, it's not to beat us down and to make us feel gloomy, but it is a reminder for us that we have these hidden potentials and we have infinite possibilities for change. Does it make sense? Okay. So when we take refuge in the Buddhas, we are cultivating the utmost reverence for the highest aspiration. When we bow to the Buddha, we just don't bow to the statue, cement statue. We are recognizing something that's very valuable. Because the Buddha represents something that is very valuable. And when we have commitment to the Buddha, we will have this strong faith and this dedication. And we will have this confidence in us to not give up halfway in pursuit of greatness. Because we don't have this commitment, this reverence, and we're trying to pursue something great, we can give up halfway because of distractions, because we don't have enough confidence in ourselves and the dedication to pursue what we aspire to pursue. And when we have this confidence and when we achieve this greatness, we start to enter the realm of sagehood. 坛养上人, sagehood, right? And that is success. And it comes from ending the attachment and selfishness to help others. So when we have reverence to the Buddha, we need to understand about the Buddha, right? We have this reverence to Buddha, and who is this person that we have respect and dedication to? We should understand a little bit about the Buddha. And from the scriptures, we understand that Shakyamuni Buddha was a living example of what perfection is, worldly and spiritually. He was an example of what perfection is. We know that he has to be very positive because he entered jhana. His body, speech, and mind was flawlessly skillful in a complete positive state. And with awareness, even with every single gesture, he was complete with awareness, and therefore he was flawless. For example, in this picture you may have seen with the Buddha's hand, very beautiful illustration. And this came from the story because of the Buddha trying to illustrate to his disciple when he was giving Dhamma talks, that even every gesture was about maintaining that awareness. And so that's the path of the virtue, is to become so alert that even small acts, even small gestures, small movements of your arms, and all the movements all become full of awareness. So that's jhana, is that he maintained awareness throughout. And we should have real appreciation of what the Buddha stood for. In order to have reverence for the Buddha, we need to understand what it is that the Buddha stands for. And during the Buddha's time, he stood for perfection, wisdom, courage, equality for all, empowerment, selflessness, and the truth. For example, with courage, he endured what others could not. For example, when he was still practicing austerity, kuhan, right? You can see that he was able to endure a lot, where it was very difficult for anybody to follow. So he was very courageous in putting himself out there to achieve enlightenment. And there was a story here, and in terms of endurance. Some time ago, I think a few lectures ago, I shared with you the story of Magandiya, who was very beautiful. Her father wanted to marry Magandiya, her daughter, to the Buddha, offer his beautiful daughter to the Buddha in marriage to the Buddha, but the Buddha refused because of that she regarded him as his enemy. And so later on, when she became queen of King Udana, she hired some citizens and their servants to abuse the Buddha, because she knew that the Buddha was coming to her town. So she hired a lot of people coming out to abuse the Buddha. So Ananda, knowing this, urged the Buddha, say, let's go to another town. There are people waiting for us to hurt us, because the queen does not like us. So let's move to another town. But the Buddha was so courageous because he knew that he had a duty to help people. So he said that it is better to solve a problem in the place where it arises. Like I am an elephant in a battlefield, like an elephant who withstands the arrows that come from all quarters. I will bear patiently the abuses that come from people without morality. And so he was so brave in not caring for his own fame. He was able to endure the abuse of people because he knew that by doing that, he could change them. So he had the strength, the courage to endure that what many people would not be able to endure, physically, mentally, psychologically. Right? For us, knowing that when we walk into a room that people are waiting to yell at us, to use words that are not even in a dictionary to describe us, we would probably want to run away or go elsewhere. Why would you want to hang around with people that you don't like? But the Buddha had a mission to help those people, such and such people in that town. So he had to go through that experience in order to get to what he wanted to do. So he didn't care about the abuse, right? So that's courage. Then equality, he opened doors to women and those in the lower caste. In the ancient Indian society, and even still now, the society was governed by a caste system, right? The people in the lower caste would not be able to participate in societal activities. But the Buddha was so courageous that he opened up doors for women and those in the lower caste to participate and to achieve their potentials. So he was really, civil rights movement started 2,500 years ago. And the Sangha, which is a group of monks in his group, the Sangha, was a diverse and inclusive group of people. We're now talking about inclusiveness, right? Engagement, diversity. But this diversity was happening 2,500 years ago. So it was way before its time. And then empowerment was that it enriches culture in countries wherever it goes. Right? It goes to China, it enriches the Chinese culture. When it goes to Europe, it enriches the European country. It doesn't take over. And selflessness, this is a very unique principle, unlike any other, to be completely altruistic, completely selfless. And that's what the Buddha was. And of course, he represented the truth. His teaching has been tested over time and space. Right? Not only was it good in India 2,500 years ago, it's still applicable now. We're still learning it now. We're still reaping the benefits now in America, living in the American soil. So the Buddha, when we bow to the Buddha, we show our reverence. We are aspire for greatness of the Buddha's great compassion and ultimate wisdom. right? The Buddha was able to give up what people would kill, fame, fortune, power, like Devadatta. And when we compare to ourselves to the Buddha, we are at the very bottom. We are just a speck of dust, and the Buddha is like a Mount Sumeru, a huge object. So when we bow to the Buddha, we should have this reverence, this awe, and this aspiration, this inspiration. And that's what the meaning is when we bow to the Buddha, it should come from our heart. And because we understand how great the Buddha is. As one increases merits and wisdom, one will naturally want to have more reverence for the Buddha. One will have respect for the Buddha because the Buddha represents something great and wonderful. And when we cultivate, the more we cultivate and we have wisdoms and merits, we will have this aspiration for greatness as well. And therefore, it's a natural tendency to want to respect the Buddha, to have respect for the Buddha, to have reverence for the Buddha. So when we increase our merits and wisdom, we will have more compassion, and we want to bring benefits to ourselves and others. But if we decrease our merits and wisdom, then we will come up with justification to satisfy our selfish, neurotic craving. Right? We want to satisfy our selfish craving. And we'll tend to want to have that self-benefiting and indulgence. And it will it may be in disguise of carefree and liberating attitude. Oh, I don't care. I live free life. I don't need to bow to anything. I don't need to study. We're making excuses. And although it may feel like we're carefree, there's a lot of freedom in our lives. But in reality, it is a decrease of merits. Our merits depleting because we no longer have reverence for the Buddha, but we want to live our lives the way we want without observing morality, right? So we have to be careful that when we stop having this reverence for the Buddha, it could be a sign that our merits are depleting, our wisdom is depleting, decreasing. When we prostrate to the Buddha, lay by, bye for prostration. Prostration, bow is just halfway. Prostration is all the way your forehead, your palms, and your elbows and your knees. All those points are on the ground. That's prostration. When we prostrate to the Buddha, we start to increase our merit and wisdom. Why? Because we are strengthening our foundation of merit cultivation. Having reverence for the Buddha, that is the foundation of merit cultivation. If we don't have reverence for the Buddha, anything that we build on top will not be reliable, like we discussed last time, right? For example, before we practice, before we have merit cultivation, before we practice merit and wisdom, when a skillful state arises, we find a way to justify it. We get angry. We have this egoistic behavior. Like you get angry and you say, "This is who I am." I'm angry. This is who I am. You don't recognize that is unskillful before you practice, before you study Buddhism. But after you study Buddhism and you have merits and you have wisdom, you start to recognize, hey, that anger is not good. It's depleting my merits. You have that recognition. And when you practice meditation, your mind becomes clear now that there is no reason to be unskillful. You can control yourself. Some people can't. Some people in an argument, they have to be the one to have the last word, right? Because they don't see that. But with a meditated mind, you can let it go. And it's not like you're forcing yourself to let go, but you see there's no loss in not having the last word. So when we prostrate to the Buddha, we start to see signs of growth. When we have the ability to recognize our own faults and weakness, that's a sign of merit. Right? When we can see what's right and what's wrong, what's unskillful and what's not skillful, that's a sign of merit. when we have science and meditation is we have the ability to calmly address the issues without being angry, upset. And we're not in denial. You can recognize it. You can maintain your calm. That is a sign of meditation. And the sign of wisdom is that you're motivated to take the appropriate actions to improve, to resolve issues. You just don't stop there. You don't ignore the problem. You don't sweep the problems underneath the rug, but to take actions, the appropriate actions. And sometimes we have the best intentions to do something, but we still make mistakes in our behavior and our thinking. And that's what cultivation is about, right? When we follow the 3 steps, precepts, meditation, and wisdom, the more that we find we have a lot of faults. Before we study Buddhism, before we study merit cultivation, meditation, wisdom, we couldn't find any faults. But after the more that you study, you seem to find more faults, that is improvement. Because without knowing what to improve, there is no avenue for us to improve. We should not be afraid to find a lot of faults in us. That's how we correct, because we have the strength to correct. Some people, they deny the faults because it's too overwhelming for them to acknowledge that they are faulty. But when we study Buddhism, when we can face our own faults and not be in denial, we know that we have gained strength, spiritual strength, mental strength to face the problems head on and not trying to sugarcoat it, right? And so that's the spirit of Buddhism, is to always to improve, right? So to summarize this before we move on to the next one, is that having reverence for the Buddhas is the foundations of merit and wisdom cultivation. And with merit, it leads us to success. And that means that we should be true to ourselves. We should be consistent in our thought, speech, and actions. When we have in a positive state, our mind will bend towards positivity. And with skillfulness, we can observe the precepts, and that allows us to practice meditation to maintain calm, and allows when our mind is calm, we can see things very clearly, and that allows us to eliminate the roots of all suffering. In other words, there may be pain, but there is no suffering. And that is the spirit of Buddhism, to create the right conditions for what is it that we want to achieve, and to not get tied down by worldly joy and suffering. And that's because of our meditative ability. And we continue towards unconditionality, the ultimate reality. Okay. So that is what when we talked about reverence for the Buddha, is it allows us to build this strong foundation of merits. Yes. And when we have reverence for the Buddha and we practice Nianfo or Nimfa, Buddha mindfulness, we can easily absorb meditation because we have this strong foundation of merits, right? Reverence for Buddha is building a strong foundation of merits. And with a strong foundation merit, that's what allows a good fertile ground for meditation to grow. Okay. We'll skip this one next time because I was preparing for this, so we'll come back to that. The next Buddha in the nadir direction, nadir is down, 下方下phương. Dharma banner Buddha, Pháp tràng Phật. Dharma, Pháp or Phật. Pháp is Dharma, and banner Jang is, this banner here is like a flag, right? You see one of those posts to show you, to designate activities going on. And it represents bird's eye view for all beings to choose the right method. And that is Master Ching Kong's explanation of what this Buddha represents. And And I chose to talk about humility because in order for us to understand what is good and what's right, there is a component of humility in order to recognize it. Otherwise, our ego will cast a shadow and we won't be able to see what's good and what's right and to choose the right method. Okay. So to cultivate infinite merits, there are three components that we should have. One is utmost reverence for the Buddha, like we just talked about, a strong foundation. The other one is compassion. And the third one is humility, being humble. And that will allows us to have this a strong foundation of ethics and morality. And the ultimate morality is selflessness. Like we discussed in the past, with abundant merits, it allows us to achieve our goals, to become successful. And of course, we should be aware of the hidden trap, because when you cultivate merits, when your merits come to fruition, things will be smooth. But there is a hidden trap behind it. And with humility, when we practice humility, we are more receptive to merit cultivation. And it's very easy with merit, abundant merit, it's very easy for us to be successful, but if we're not careful, we can encounter failure. And we can look at history to understand, to have clear examples of what this means. For example, in China, China has a long history that we can learn from. There's an imperial period, which is the period starting at the Qin dynasty, Nhà Tần, Qin Cao Rui, all the way from 2021 all the way to about 1900 or so, or 1000 AD, about this time, from the Qin dynasty to the Tang dynasty, Nhà Đường. This is the bulk of the Chinese history, the imperial period, and you can see that during that period, there's almost like a cycle of rising and falling of dynasties, right? A one dynasty will come up and will fall. Another one will take over, either a long duration or a short duration, and it will fall again. And so this history repeats. For example, in the Qin dynasty, there's because after a while, the citizens start to suffer because of hardships and difficulties. And there was a peasant leader, Liu Bang. He led the peasants to overthrow the Qin dynasty, and he established the Han dynasty. But after a while, corruptions occur, and then it got replaced by another dynasty. So we can see the collapse and the rise of history, and to understand that if we're not careful with the prosperity that we have, the success that we have, we can easily encounter failures. And also, not only that, but in Buddhism too. At the start of Buddhism, with our historical Shakyamuni Buddha, the Buddhism was very prosperous, right? Easy for people to learn with the Buddha and to be successful. But after a while, it started to lose its momentum. About 1,000 years started to lose its momentum, and it required great masters to be born into this world to revive Buddhism, right? To revive it. So when we reflect this, it's not that it's history and it doesn't impact us. It's directly related to us, because if we don't reflect on this, our own cultivation can encounter failure as well. Our own cultivation is not an exception to this. It can follow the history, the rise and fall, as we've seen in history. So we want to be successful, we have to be prepared. Otherwise, we're going to face failure. So that's what we can learn. That's what we can learn from history. And our failures, these failures here may seem like a natural cycle, right? The rise and fall of these dynasties may seem like a natural cycle, but it's not that there was no reason, and it was not a coincidence. It was not an accident that things happened. The rise and the fall especially happened. And from a Buddhist standpoint, we can say that with the wrong view in our cultivation, if we don't have this right view, we will have this egoistic attachment, and arrogance arise because we have become complacent. We don't want to grow anymore. We think that we have learned all there is to learn. And this is very natural for people to fall if there is no cultivation, there is no discipline. Because this is the natural law called natural law of entropy. Right? Mức độ, trật tự. Entropy is a law of disorder. For example, you put a drop of ink in water, what do you see? The ink starts to disperse right away. So things will naturally disperse because that becomes disorder. Because when a single drop concentrated, that is order. But then after you put in the water, it starts to disperse away, becomes disorder. So same thing too. If we don't have the discipline, there will be a decline in morality because of the natural law of disorder, entropy. And that will lead to failure. And without a strong foundation of merits, it can easily lead to collapse. Any building that we don't have a strong foundation, no matter how, in fact, the higher you go, the more likely you're going to fall because there's no strong foundation, right? So then, because there is a natural tendency to go against morality. And it is due to the fact that of our ego, the nature of the selfish craving and indulgence. So when people enjoy and there is no mindfulness, it's likely for them to follow the path of indulgence, right? The path of indulgence, enjoyment. And that's what leads to arrogance and complacence. And that is very destructive. So when we feel complacent, we are self-satisfied and we see no room for improvement. That's the danger. And with arrogance, we see the self, ourself, as more important than everybody else. And it's a great feeling. And psychologically, it's very addictive to have this great feeling. And that's what, I mean, it's addiction because everybody craves for it. Everybody wants power because it's a very great feeling to feel that you are on top of things. And because this feeling is very safe, right? When you know that you're on top of things and nobody can fight you off and you have control of things, it's a safe feeling and it's very addictive. And know that things are in the palms of your hand. And this thinking is very dangerous because it may or may not be true that we are better than other people, but with arrogance, we feel like we are better than other people. And that's called arrogance. We think that we are better than other people. And that is the starting point of merit depletion. Because it erodes, it weakens the foundation of morality, and it will attract unskillful karma, and that's what leads to failure. For example, like a person in a company working very hard, and he has helped to increase sales, productivity, efficiencies, and improve quality and so forth. He gets a lot of recognition. So it's normal for him to feel proud of his achievement. But the problem is that when he starts to expect compliments and recognition on a regular basis because he's doing a good job, that's where it's a problem because he becomes more attached and more egoistic. So feeling top notch, it's very addictive to him because he's at the top and nobody can compare to him. So he feels safe, he feels satisfied, and it is addicting. And that's why it starts to destroy his calm state of mind. And the reason that it disturbs him because if somebody else is getting recognition, he will feel agitated, he will feel jealous, and he may become more protective and more competitive, right? In order to preserve his satisfaction. So arrogance feeds our ego, and it weakens our morality, and it destroys our skillfulness. And that is the fertile ground, a very good soil for unskillfulness to grow. And that's why the importance of today's topic is how to build a strong foundation for our merit cultivation, but at the same time, you want to clear the field that to avoid arrogance from growing, because we can see from history, if we are not mindful, we don't have this discipline, we will rise, but then we should expect failure, because without controlling ourselves, without that strong foundation of merit, that then whatever we build on top will crumble, will come to a crumble, will collapse. So there are a few things that can increase our arrogance. One of them is talent. When we have talent, we have better skills, better abilities, and others, it's very easy for us to become arrogant, right? You agree? Right? The second is positions. When we're in a high position, it can also make us arrogant. When we're in a positions higher than others, like a managerial positions or a leading positions, we have the authority to tell other people. And if other people don't listen, we can be angry. And so because of that, we feel we are better than other people, and it can cause arrogance. For example, normally in the normal positions, like when we have arguments about politics or economics, it's just a normal argument. But when people in high positions argue, it can lead to detrimental results. The higher you go, the decisions that you make can either bring a lot of benefits or really detrimental consequences. For example, in this here, George Bush, President's malaria initiatives has saved 1.7 million babies and toddlers in Africa. And according to this study, since 2010. So one action alone saved almost 2 million babies. So when you're in high positions, one decision that you make, you can cultivate a lot of merits. But at the same time, in a high position, when you give the order to attack a country, you can create a lot of harm and death, right? So the danger of that is that in the higher positions, that's why it requires merits, morality, meditation, wisdom in order to avoid failures. The third thing that could make us arrogant is our diploma, our credentials, right? We graduated from a well-known institutions, and we are well-educated, we're well-qualified than other people, and we want our status to be high up, and so we expect things to look up to us, people to look up to us, and that can make us arrogant. And the fourth thing is age and experience. Age is probably more of a Asian culture than a Western, Eastern culture than Western. But as we grow older, we have more experience. It is difficult for us to join our palms and show respect to younger people. If we cannot do that, then it's very easy for arrogance to come, to rise. And this is something that affects everybody, because as we grow older, we gain more experience, and the people around us are all younger. It's very easy for us to think that we are better than they are, right? And the fourth is environment. If we're surrounded by those who respect us all the time, and the more humble that we are, the more respect that they want to show, and that is very easy for us to become arrogant, because over time, we start to believe that we are really good. So that's another trap that we should watch out for. In his book, Bodhisattva Ideal, Shankarashita, he said, the danger is that after you cultivate for a while and you have some achievement, you start collecting disciples, students, right? And those disciples will tell you that you are enlightened, and they want to believe that you are enlightened, maybe for their own satisfaction, that they want people to know that they are following an enlightened teacher, right? So they want to boast about it, and they want you to believe too that you are enlightened. He says, it is then rather difficult because they don't let you get out of it. They'll say, oh no, you are enlightened. Don't think that you are not. You are mistaken. We know you are enlightened. And so if we don't have mindfulness, after a while we start to believe, hey, I am enlightened. There's so many people around me, they dedicated to me, they respect me, right? And we start to have this illusion in our mind. This is a cruel and a terrible way to mess with somebody's head. If you want to mess somebody's head, you just praise them. You just continue to compliment them, and eventually you ruin them. So without discipline and humility, we start to believe that we are really enlightened ourselves, right? We start to enjoy the compliments and the praises of others. So when we think ourselves are perfect, we no longer exert our efforts. We're no longer being mindful of our thoughts, speech, and action. So we become careless because we think that we are perfect. Whatever we do must be correct, must be perfect too. But that is a big mistake, because when we make mistakes or when we get criticized, we can't handle the negativity. And we become angry, we become arrogant, we may even hide our own mistakes. Because to not disappoint the followers, the disciples, we will hide our mistakes, or we become offensive to squash the mistakes. To quash the mistakes, to eliminate the criticisms. And we hide our mistakes, and that's where failures begins to loom, right? So arrogance is more explicit. You can see it, but self-pride is more implicit, meaning you cannot see it. For example, you may be a humble person, but there is self-pride because you know you're better than other people. You just don't show it, but inside you're better than other people. More well-educated, more money, more merits, and so forth. More abilities, but there is self-pride. So self-pride is more difficult to eliminate, because we know we are worth something. We just don't show it, right? So the only way to eliminate self-pride is to eliminate the ego, to become Alohan, Arhat, or Alahan. And to achieve Arhat, Alohan, or Alahan, we have to have eliminated the 5 obstructions, and one of which is arrogance or conceit. So in order to enter the realm of sagehood, we have to eliminate arrogance. And that's why the importance of today's topic is to prevent failures and to open the doors to sagehood for ourselves. There are 3 forms of conceit. One is position of superiority. Second, position of inferiority. Superiority is you think you're better than other people. Inferiority is you think that other people are better than you. Now it's very interesting here that the third one, egalitarianism, equality, is also a form of conceit. So let's see what the Buddha said here. In the Samyutta Nikaya A Hán Kinh, Xiang Ying Bu Kinh Tương Ứng Bộ, he said here that arrogance here is that I am superior than you. It's very easy to understand this one. But there's also I am equal to you, and also I'm inferior to you. All these three here are forms of arrogance or conceit. So it's kind of surprising that the Buddha should have said this, but if we reflect on it, we'll see that it is a form of conceit. So superiority and inferiority is just the opposite of each other. But equality here, egalitarianism is also a form of conceit, because it is insisting that everyone is equal by bringing those down to ourselves. We have no abilities, but we want to be equal, meaning we're bringing everybody down to us at the same level. So somebody says that I'm a lover of equality, is what they really are saying is that they want to bring everybody else down to their own level. And this is a great weakness, a great loss. Because if there is nobody above us, spiritually speaking, then we have nobody to look up to, nobody to learn from. And so it's going to be very difficult to make spiritual progress if we don't have anybody to look up to. So that's why it's easy for arrogance to come to fruition, because there's nobody to look up to. We think we're better than everybody because we have brought everybody down to our level. Now we're equal. So that's why it's a form of conceit, a form of arrogance. In Bodhisattva Ideal, Sankarsita says that it is most important for us to be in contact with people who are a little bit more spiritually advanced than us, who can shine the light of reality more clearly. And those are called spiritual friends. So spiritual friends are important in our cultivation. And he said that if we happen to have the opportunity to meet the Buddha, we probably wouldn't be able to make much of encounterings or even realize the nature of that person in front of us. But we're more likely to benefit from spiritual friends. Because even if a Buddha appears in front of us, we won't be able to reap the benefits of that because we're not up to that level. We won't be able to communicate in a way to ask questions. For example, in lectures, sometimes we don't even know the questions to ask. So we have 善知识, 停机thức, we have gurus, but we cannot ask any questions because we don't know what questions we have. Therefore, they cannot help us to eliminate our doubt. But with friends, when we have open communication, spiritual friends, when we talk in an open environment, we start to talk and ask questions, and they can help us. And so that's why a spiritual friend can sometimes be more helpful to us than to meet a Buddha or to meet a great masters, because we may be too fearful to ask questions, or we just have blanks in our mind, and we don't know what questions to ask. But in a normal conversation with our spiritual friends, we can ask and we can learn from them. So that's why he said here that sometimes it is more important to be with our spiritual friends than a great master, because we reap more benefits. So those are three forms you can see. So we should not only avoid seeing ourselves better than other people, but we should avoid seeing ourselves below other people. And we should avoid bringing other people down to our level to make everybody equal, right? So those three forms of conceit. But before we can achieve that greatness, that entering the sagehood realm, we should at least do damage control. We have arrogance in us, we know, but we cannot eliminate it, we know. But at least we can control it. That's something that we can certainly do, is to control it, and to not allow it to grow anymore. So if we don't remove the roots of arrogance, it will grow again. And so while we can contain it, we should do something to eliminate it. And it's human nature for us to like praises, to enjoy comfort, right? And to shy away from difficulties and discomfort. It's very normal. But if we live our lives according to our human psychology, where we like comfort and dislike discomfort, then we are building this fertile ground for arrogance to grow. So when we have discipline, and cultivation, we show loving kindness and respect, then we are preventing the fertile ground for arrogance to grow. And what that means is that although we may not have a lot to offer, we can at least offer love and respect. And everybody needs love and respect. Because when we observe the precepts, and we practice and we show and give love and respect to others, and I mean it is enough to provide happiness to those around us, right? We may not have great merits, we may not have great wisdom, we may not have deep knowledge of the Dharma, but we can at least offer love and respect, right? So in the holiday season, I may not have a lot to offer, but at least you have my love and respect. So this is the foundation of great wisdom and merits. And it is enough to provide happiness to ourselves, our friends and family and strangers and all sentient beings with just love and respect. Okay. There's quite a little bit more that I want to share with you, but unfortunately we've come to the end of the lecture. There's much more interesting information I would like to share with you, but I don't want to go over time. So let's just quickly review. So we observe from history that the rise and falls of dynasties, and we should reflect that our own cultivation could rise and fall too. And it is not a coincidence, it is not an accident that people fall from their success. And that is because of the lack of self-discipline, the lack of humility, of humbleness. When we practice and merits, we observe the precepts. It allows us to see the difference between wrong and right. And when we practice meditation, we overcome that and we can maintain a very calm mind, bliss. But that's not enough because we're only suppressing our problems. We have to practice wisdom in order to remove sufferings at the root. And when we have problems, we can either use our egoistic way to suppress the problem, to solve the problems, or we can use our merits as foundation to overcome. Because when we encounter negativity, we can recognize that we are about to commit unskillful deeds, right? And so we can stop, and we don't feel agitated. And when we have this meditative mind, we can see things very clearly, and therefore we can see the true reality. There are three components we talked about: dissatisfaction, 苦口, impermanence, 无常, 无我, 无thường, and no ego, no self, 无我 or 无我. When we see those three components in situations, then we are seeing true reality. And the more that we cultivate merits, we should have more compassion. And that's how we know that we are increasing our merits. And the more merits that we have, we should have reverence for the Buddha, because the Buddha represents greatness. So we are aspired for greatness. So there should be a natural tendency to want to respect the Buddha, to have reverence for the Buddha. Otherwise, if we're making excuses that we want to live our lives in a free, carefree attitude, we could be depleting our merits. Or we could be a state of depleting our merits. We may not have a lot to offer, but there are two things that we all can offer, are love and respect, right? Those two things are enough to bring happiness for ourselves, our family, everybody around us. Does it make sense? Are there any comments? Okay, next time I would like to talk about, continuing the discussions, is to talk about arrogance creating the mental pollution, and the methods to cultivate humility, to overcome arrogance, is how to cultivate the spirit of humility, humbleness. Okay? All right? So let's do merit dedication. Okay, if you could please join your palms together, we recite. May the merits and virtues accrue today adorn the Buddha Pure Lands, repay 4 types of kindness above, and aid those suffering in the paths below. May those who see and hear of this bring forth the resolve for the Bodhi-mind. When this retribution body is complete, together we shall meet in the land of ultimate bliss. If you could please rise, and we bow to the Buddha 3 times to show our respect. First bow, second bow, and third bow. Amida. Please stay back for lunch.